Hi folks, George DeSantis here with the weekly look at the market for the week ending October 30th, 2015. You might note that on the opening page it states that it's for the week ending October 23rd. Just ignore that. I just haven't been able to change the date on the software. So let's begin by taking a look at the monthly chart of the S&P. Hi folks, this is the monthly chart of the S&P 500. So we can see that last month's October presented us with a nice bullish bar closing near the high for the month. Okay. And so that's very bullish. And in fact, before that, we had an inside candle, which was also signaling that this market appears to be turning around. We had that turnaround. We have a shortening of the MACD histogram. So all in all, the monthly chart is in turnaround mode, is the way I might put it. So let's take a look at the weekly chart of the S&P. So on the weekly chart of the S&P 500, just to recap a bit, we can see that since we had this bullish hammer, the market has turned around and the Kalman filter has started to trend up, recently crossing above the instantaneous trend line. We've had four really bullish bars, and then last week we had this doji candlestick, which is a spinning top. It looks like a top, doesn't it? And that's what it's called. And it's really an indication of the uncertainty at this point of the direction in which the market might go. So investors are saying, I'm not quite sure. Perhaps we've gotten to this resistance level here. We should take something off the table. As they say, we should move our stops up. Maybe, that sort of action has been accounting for this stalemate here last week. Okay. We've had a nice move up for the last 5 weeks, and now we're getting some consolidation here, it would seem to me. However, what I am impressed by personally is the angle of ascent of the Kalman filter. It didn't just go, at a 30-degree angle, but this thing really ramped up here, and that's to me very bullish. The next thing to note is that the parabolic was hit here. The parabolic yellow dot was hit at this bar 2 weeks ago, and now it's decidedly below the most current bar, which signals, according to the parabolic, a change in the direction of the trend. Remember, parabolic is the true name for the parabolic is a parabolic stop and reverse trend. So now we have that signal from parabolic that the trend is now really uptrend. Okay. Now, if we look at the RSI broke above 50%, which I consider as the line in the sand sort of thing. When it's above 50%, the market is usually doing quite well. In other words, bullishly, acting bullishly. If we look down at the MACD histogram, we can see that there was a continuous trend up. We are now in bullish territory at 7.28 above the zero line, 7.28 above the zero line. So MACD lines have also crossed. So this is another bullish indication. Percent R is just about hovering around the 80% line. Should it go above 80%, it'll just indicate even more bullishness here. So the weekly chart looks pretty bullish, and it appears that we're getting some consolidation at this level just before we confront this high for the year, this all-time high in August, in July actually. So we are waiting to see, should we bump off of this high and come back down and test the instantaneous trend line again, or will we break above it? And that is to be determined. Now we'll take a look at the daily chart of the S&P 500. We can see that since we had this double bottom and this morning star bullish formation here, we've had a nice move up in this S&P market. We've had these stages of a drive up, some consolidation, another drive up, consolidation, etc. Same pattern continuing to repeat itself. The question now is, how high is up? When do we find some weakness here? Well, the next Fibonacci extension level is 1.618 at 2117. we surpassed the 1.272 Fibonacci extension, where quite a few people would take some profits or at least tighten up their stops, their stop loss orders. Right now, we still have the recent price bar above the parabolic, so there is no indication from parabolic to reverse trend here. On the Jerry Appel's sum of the rate of change indicator, we crossed above the 4% line here, and we are still maintaining that level above the 4% line. That's a momentum indicator, by the way, and so it's telling us the momentum is very strong. At the bottom of the chart, I also look at percent R as a momentum indicator, and that is just confirming that this momentum is pretty strong here. So MACD also is above the zero line. So this is also quite bullish, even though we've had some weakening here. That's not unusual when you have a nice trend like this. MACD may weaken a bit, but there's no divergence. So we don't need to be too concerned about MACD at this point. Let's take a look at the weekly chart of the NASDAQ. Now let's take a look at the weekly chart of the NASDAQ composite. It looks similar to the S&P 500. Since we had this hammer here at the end of this consolidation period, the market has, as we know on the other indices, has trended up. So we have a nice steep ascent of the Kalman filter crossing above the instantaneous trend line. The parabolic stop and reverse indicator, the yellow dot, was hit by this bar two weeks ago, and now last week it positioned itself below the recent bar, last week's price bar candlestick. So this is all pretty bullish. Let's take a look at RSI 12 here in the middle pane. We can see that it crossed above the 50% line, and that's a good indication because I have noted that when RSI 12 is above the 50% line, we're usually noting a very nice uptrend. So as long as we stay here, augurs well for the bulls. Now, at the bottom of the chart, MACD histogram recently, last week, crossed above the zero line, although it's been trending up for a while, for 3 or 4 weeks now. But it's now positioned above the zero line, which is in bullish territory, because it's now at 8.21. So on this chart, we are seeing more of those same weekly bullish signals as we saw on the S&P 500. Let's take a look now at the daily chart of the NASDAQ composite. So this is the daily chart of the NASDAQ composite. We can see that since the Kalman filter crossed above the instantaneous trend line, we've had a very nice uptrend here. In fact, I've heard that the NASDAQ gained something like about 6% in the month of October. I believe the S&P and the Dow gained a little more, like 8.5%, somewhere around that. As we look at the NASDAQ composites daily chart, we see that we had a nice gap up, some consolidation, then we gapped up again, and we had some consolidation. On Friday, we had a bearish engulfing candlestick because the red body of this candle engulfed this small green body of the previous one. So that's somewhat bearish, but there are so many other positive indicators here that I don't know that this is going to be so significant. When we look at MACD, it's still above the zero line, and that's bullish, in bullish territory. When we come down to the bottom of the chart, we see Jerry Appel's sum of the rate of change indicator crossed above the 4% line and has remained there ever since. So this is a signal that I use to trade the NASDAQ composite or the NASDAQ itself, and I trade the TQQQ or the QQQs in order to get a trade on the NASDAQ. So at this point, all these charts on the dailies, the weeklies, and even the monthly of the S&P are all looking very bullish. I'd like to show you one other chart. Now, I mentioned recently that I bought some Netflix stock. So I'd like to show you the weekly chart of Netflix on TC2000. What we have here is a weekly chart that has been trending up, and splits 7 for 1 back here in July. And since it split, it made a high here at A, and it's pulled back in August with the rest of the market, I guess. And now it's been consolidating within this symmetrical triangle. Okay, this bullish symmetrical triangle. Typically at the top of an uptrend, like this weekly uptrend, when you get a triangle like this, an ascending, or rather a symmetrical triangle, the triangle often resolves itself to the upside. Okay, so this is one of the rationale for me looking to buy Netflix at this time. I've been looking for a buying opportunity. If we look at this chart, we find that this line here at 95.68, this horizontal line, this magenta line, really shows up as a very strong support resistance line. Here we had resistance, and then it turned to be support, because as soon as the market went up here, and now it seems to be holding as support. We broke through it, but then we closed above it. We came down and closed just above it, closed above it. And so this line has been holding, this 95.68. So that seems to be a really strong support level. Right now, I've calculated that they take the high of 129.29 minus 85.80, which is the low, A minus B, and add the result to this position E, which is about 108. It's $108 a share, and you come up with a target of 151.49. That's a damn big move. I just hope we can get that, and it's possible. This stock has moved tremendously in the past few years. So let's take a look at the daily chart on this Netflix. On the daily chart of Netflix, we see a similar symmetrical triangle, of course, the ABCD triangle, with the breakout level up at E, and hopefully we will break above that to resolve the triangle to the upside. The numbers that I just quoted you on the weekly chart, they show up here. This is where I calculated it. When we look at the resistance line, it's 90, 95, 96, somewhere around there. But this is the area where we find most of the resistance on the magenta line and support. We find support here right now. It used to be the resistance over here. Over here was resistance, now it's support. MACD just broke above the zero line, and also Williams percentile broke above this 50% line. So I'm looking for a nice move here. I hope I'm right. If you trade it, be very careful to use stops and don't look away. All right. That's the end of the look at the market for today. Thank you very much for listening.